Hi, everyone. This is going to be a episode in our series, The Shapira Scrolls, and this will be episode 3. And if you don't know what the Shapira Scrolls are, it's a alleged recovery in the 1880s of the Book of Deuteronomy, allegedly in its complete, true, original form, according to what some modern scholars are claiming. But in the 1880s, it was found to be a forgery by the museums and specialists who were hired specifically to look into it. The man selling these scrolls was a guy named Shapira, and after it was found to be a forgery by those scholars, those experts, he committed suicide. So I think that's an important fact. But this article today I'm reviewing, we have a couple of other episodes that went through all this. Uh, the significant thing that many people mention about the Shapira Scrolls is it has the Ten Commandments, but they conveniently leave out the fact that the blasphemy command has been removed and replaced by the command, do not hate your brother. Okay, so this article I'm going to just read the preface from is entitled, the author is Mattheiu, Richelle, entitled The Shapira Scrolls in Light of Paleography, Six Impossible Things Before Breakfast, Semitica, Volume 63 in the year 2021 at pages 243 to 294. Now, I'm not going to bring this up later in my evaluations here, but I just want to throw my 3 cents in. It's a very significant fact that none of these scholars ever mentioned the elephant in the room. What is that? Shapira committed suicide. Why? Shapira had a financial motive to forge them, and that was because he was the one selling these items, and the museums were hiring experts to verify these are something they should pay lots and lots of money, things that would be in the hundreds of thousands, if not much higher in our current environment if you just adjust it for inflation. And the other third thing is he was involved in many other fraudulent sales that went through and he made money, and they weren't detected as frauds until later. So there's absolutely, we're talking about admission that when people act in a certain way inconsistent with innocence, we conclude and infer they're guilty. So somebody who commits suicide uh, in this situation where he's accused of producing and trying to sell forged items is a very uh, indicative of something if he had an otherwise motive to forge, and that would be to make money. So if you're there being found a forger of something that you submitted to uh, museums for sale, trying to make a lot of money, you might feel bad about doing that because you could be arrested. I'm sure there's a statute or law in England at this time to prosecute you for fraud or attempted fraud or criminal. In crime, you don't have to actually commit the crime. You just have to have attempted to commit a financial crime. So I have a feeling he was not just ashamed, but he was avoiding criminal prosecution by killing himself. But that's never discussed. I don't know why. I think they're trying to be gentlemen and they don't want to go, they would call that like trying to point a finger at Mr. Shapiro when he can no longer defend himself. Well, that was his choice. Nobody forced him to kill himself. But I digress. Okay, so now I'm going to move on. All right, so in the description to this video, you'll see a link to my Airtable view of these two works by Richelle. And you'll see over here to the right, it'll have images of the article. Both articles are involved here. And the one that I'm reviewing in this episode is here, the second one at the bottom. And you just have to double click the icon for the image of the picture, and it will download a PDF. Now, if you use this, you're taking it on condition that within 30 days you must destroy the original and have made no copies. Therefore, I'm giving this to you as a library loan, and because this is not intended for you to exploit it in any commercial way whatsoever. Do not do that. You can use it for academic purposes only, to study and do research with. Okay, so let's move on. All right, now this scroll, everyone, it has to do with the book of Deuteronomy. So basically, it gets rid of all the law in Deuteronomy except the Ten Commandments, but even within the Ten Commandments, it gets rid of the blasphemy command and replaces it with do not hate your brother. Okay, so now why would a Christian? I'm a Christian, so I'm going to have a bias that if this doesn't have to be added to the Bible for some important reason, it shouldn't be to change. Actually, what it does is subtracts 20 chapters of the book, not 20, from Deuteronomy 12 onward, it subtracts all these chapters until you get to the very end. So you get a couple of ones at the end. So you're going to get rid of Deuteronomy 13, Deuteronomy 18, all the passages that involve apostasy, therefore are gone from Deuteronomy 13. All the passage about Deuteronomy 18 about the prophet. Jesus was the prophet according to Acts 3, as we'll see. So these are all gone, and that's their unique position. There is no other place the apostasy command existed in the form or even anything close to it in any other passage. We don't have the prophet prophecy in any other passage of the law. So these are material to me, and unless this work is a true work by someone who didn't kill himself out of guilt, obviously, and shame for having tried to swindle museums, I I'm not going to take this book seriously. But I have a person who's associated with me for a very long period of time and a supporter of the channel's other principles, is a diehard Shapira Scrolls fan, and I don't think he understands the consequences to Jesus. He would be completely invalidated. So let me show him again and others of you who are maybe in his same camp. I went and looked up what are all the passages cited by Jesus in the law, and the law particularly, and then looked at Deuteronomy. And one of the passages that is Deuteronomy 17 verses 6 to 19 to 15. I did this in the prior episode, and this is proven to be exactly still there in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So this corruption had to have occurred not in the modern era, or excuse me, this rewrite or this version of Deuteronomy had to be before the time of Christ. Okay, well, what does that mean? That means, just to be sure you know, that the Dead Sea Scrolls is approximately from about 150 BC to about 50 AD, and so there's no way that this the passage I'm looking at here, Deuteronomy 17, that Jesus is quoting, isn't something that had been in existence sometime prior. But if the Shapira scroll is valid, and it's called the Valediction of Moses by Mr. Edon Dershowitz, and it's called the Moses Scroll by Mr. Nichols. If that work were correct, then Jesus is quoting what? A spurious passage. It's not really there. It was never there, and Jesus shouldn't have known that. He shouldn't have quoted it just because it's in its existence at the time of his from a Dead Sea Scroll era type text. No, he should know better, but he doesn't, and that would mean my Jesus is not really prophetic at all. That's issue number one. Issue number two is that you have this passage is gone. Deuteronomy 18 verses 15 to 19. There is no equivalent passage of the prophecy of the prophet anywhere else in all of the Bible, except this passage is quoted in the book of Acts in chapter 3, verse 21 to 23. And I'll just show you here. Here's the Acts version of it, quoting it. And here it is here. So this passage is where God Yahweh says, Moses, the people are right. When I delivered the law to you, they were frightened. They got scared of my voice. So you know what? I'm going to in the future speak through a man like you, and he is going to have every word that he speaks will be from me, and I will hold all men accountable to having listened to him. I'm just paraphrasing it. You can read it in your leisure. It's Deuteronomy 18 verses 15 to 19. Then in Acts 3:21 to 23, it is then quoted by Peter, almost verbatim. The first part here, this verse 15, 16 is quoted verbatim, in part by, down here's the site actually, in the passage of Acts 3:21 to 23. So, and many Christians don't know this, but Jesus wasn't just the Messiah. He was also the prophet, and that is very important. And in the early church, it was very much more emphasized. It was forgotten later. For some reason, it offends people to think Jesus was the prophet. I don't understand it. Being Messiah he was an anointed king. That's what that meant. But to be the prophet means you have to take him at a much higher level. And what is it Peter says? The command was, you shall listen to him, Jesus, in all things, whatever he says to you. It'll be that every soul that will not listen to that prophet will be utterly destroyed from among the people. So the obedience to Christ is what matters, not even an individual apostle who's not quoting Jesus. You wouldn't listen to them. You would always just listen to the prophet. Okay, so let's go on. I'm going to now read you from the preface, most of it, by Mattheiu Richelle. So here we go. At Dershowitz's instigation, a conference about the Shapira strips was organized at Harvard Law School in 2019. Then, in the wake of his publications, the text of Shapira strips was again subjected to scientific scrutiny in online and printed publications, as well as during a webinar organized by Daniel Stokel, Ben Ezra, on June 10, 2021. Richelle continues. Important, in fact, damning linguistic problems in the text V, that's the valediction of Moses of Mr. Aidan Dershowitz, his rendition and translation of the Shapira scrolls, were pointed out by B. Souchard, and this is the article here, footnote 10, R. Hendel, footnote 11, that's the one here, and R. Holmstead, that's in number 12, and that's the footnote here. This is important next, what he says. Dershowitz himself had noted in his book, The Valediction of Moses, that its language, the valediction, the translation he was making from that language of that source text he was using, does not correspond to a previously attested dialect. Footnote 13. And this is important for anybody who wants to really understand what Dershowitz is doing, is he's admitting that there is no text, that this dialect used of Hebrew that was used in the valediction of Moses doesn't correspond to any version of Hebrew that pre-existed previously. So it's like a unique new Hebrew. It can match later things like the Masoretic, but it is not matching anything earlier than the Masoretic, let's put it that way, and nothing way back in time either. So very unusual that this just strikingly comes out of nowhere with a whole new Hebrew dialect. But who am I to say? But if you want to really test the hypothesis of Mr. Dershowitz, you have to go look at these pages, and I highlighted them because if that's true, if that's what Richelle said is true, then that destroys the whole argument of Dershowitz, right? Because it doesn't have any correspondence to anything ancient, right? It's just something that came up in the time period that we found it. We found it in 1883. Stokel ben Ezra demonstrated that there is no parallel in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and more generally in Hebrew manuscripts, to the creases that appear on the strips, footnote 14. So that is actually just simply saying the same thing that Dershowitz just said, therefore taking away, depriving Dershowitz of any proof of his claim. And I mean, these are not small details. These are crucial facts. And there's footnote 14. And he did say there was some parallel, interestingly, with an Etruscan document, the dialectical language. So that's interesting. It could tell you maybe this was actually forged with some person who has knowledge of Etruscan language. Or next, the exegetical arguments put forward by Dershowitz to the effect that valediction of Moses, was a proto, meaning a first version of Deuteronomy, were convincingly refuted by Benjamin Souchard, footnote 15, that's down in here. Jeffrey Stackard, 16, that's this article or this paper given at the webinar June 2021. And then Konrad Schmid, his paper in that title is Valediction, a Literary Precursor to Deuteronomy. So that is a very heavy load for Mr. Dershowitz to try to refute, and I haven't seen that yet. But these are and he himself admits it. So that's what is so good about what Richelle did. He's saying, hey, look, he says it, and all these experts agree with him, and it destroys the premise of the whole idea of the valediction of Moses, because you can't have something that comes out of the blue that doesn't have a dialect that matches anything prior to 1883, right? Of course. Okay, now the next topic he's going to get into is paleography. Now, this is where forgery is this is the art of forgery. Can you make it look like it was a text that was earlier in time, not by its dialect, not by its phraseology, but instead by what? By its lettering. And if you're good, you can be very good and you can defraud people. What about the paleography? Although the strips are lost and the available photographs are useless because the leather was too dark, we do have various sources of evidence about the script, since drawings and paleographical tables were made by several people in 1883. André Lamar, footnote 18, it's at the bottom there, and Christopher Ralston, footnote 19, it's also at the bottom, reached the same conclusion. The script is indicative of forgeries. Do you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? These are people who are not making any money or not selling books, who are just scholars. I mean, you really have to understand that. Dershowitz, I don't blame him for trying to help sustain his work, But on the other hand, he's not pricing it very low, so you can buy it, or get it in an ebook. I've tried. I mean, his book actually, I think, has been fraudulently been circulating, the Valediction of Moses. I mean, I don't think it's with his authorization, because his book is very locked up normally, but it's been circulating unlocked online, just so you know. Uh, so somebody unlocked it, and it doesn't. Therefore, it doesn't have security. So if you're looking at the book online, you have to actually buy the book, because the online PDF is insecure. Could be changed. So anyway, um, this is the conclusion of Lemaire and Rolston, that is the script, the actual paleography, is indicative of forgery, just like it was held in 1883. Let's read what he says on that topic. The reliability and significance of this evidence was, however, minimized by Dershowitz in his publications and by Benjamin Sass during the webinar, footnote 20, with the exception of respectively 2 and 1 letters drawn by an artist. Okay, so interestingly, Dershowitz did not dispute, nor did Mr. Sass dispute, 2 and 1 letters drawn by an artist. So remember, all the letters had to be drawn by an artist of the originals, because the originals are lost, right? So they didn't dispute that those 2 and 1 letters, I'm not exactly sure what he means, 2 and 1 letters. Maybe it might be 2 letters or 1 letter. Maybe one of the gentlemen disputed 2 and the other disputed 1 letter. I think that must be the explanation. But regardless, there was some admission by Sass and Dershowitz that either 1 or 2 or both were letters that did not that did indicate forgery. Okay, in the webinar. So apparently this concession had been extracted. Incidentally, that webinar, he had given a link to it, and I tried going there, and it's not online. I tried searching its name and title, could not find it. So maybe somebody can provide that to me if you ever find it. Continuing. The present article examines afresh the various pieces of evidence about the paleography of the strips, shows that these elements converge in a way that establishes their own reliability, so that we have a reasonably good idea of the script of the documents. It is also demonstrated that the script is problematical in 3 respects: a set of anomalous letter forms, the wrong stance for a number of letters, and the presence of ligatures. According, if you were a paleography expert, this would mean something to you. I assume it means it points towards forgery. That the same problems are already found in the Moabitica. And he's going to tell you that Moabitica means a set of forged documents, which, by the way, Shapira sold and made some money on. And that the strips are fakes, probably made by the same circle of people who forged the Moabitica. So they can actually see a linkage to another document that Shapira previously marketed and made money on, and it was found later to be a forgery. I doubt he ever gave the money back. Do you think he did? So I'd like to ask the Shapiro Scroll defenders, can you find out if he gave back the money he got paid on the Moabitica? Because that gave him a huge encouragement, obviously, to then do it again and again and again, forge, make money, and people won't get it until much too late. And then it's just some experts saying, it's forged. But who's going to sue over that? You know, it's embarrassing to museums, by the way, to admit that they paid money for forged items. So, all right. So, as a Christian, though, what's my uptake on this? Then we're safe. Jesus did quote a text that actually was there, Deuteronomy 17, verses 6, and Deuteronomy 19, verse 15. And the passage of Deuteronomy 18 is still in the Bible. Can't get rid of it just because it isn't in the Shapiro Scroll. And Jesus is not quoting spurious passages. So we're still okay. But if you are a Christian and you're tempted to believe in this obviously forged document, I'm sorry to tell you, it's just so overwhelming, the evidence you've just seen here. The fact, though, in my mind, that the thing, I just want to say this. If you don't understand paleography, and if you don't understand the textual criticism, the literary issues, and all of that, I always use another way of looking at things. If I'm not familiar with those specialties either, okay, and you aren't either, probably most of you. How do you make a good decision? You use common sense. The guy kills himself. He was trying to sell it for big bucks. He had committed forgeries in the past and had gotten paid big bucks, and it wasn't exposed until later. That was the Moabitica. What about these things? These things are just common sense, tell you this guy's a crook. Down and dirty crook. So what? He went to a Jewish Christian congregation in Jerusalem. That doesn't mean anything. And that congregation had the same doctrine of the 10 Commandments plus do not love your neighbor. That was they had a confirmation ceremony. We showed you that in the last episode. Yeah, the last episode. So there's nothing appealing about Mr. Shapira to me. There's nothing I would believe he was selling that was even true. Even I would actually suspect everything that was sold, he was just he was an antiquities dealer. That was what he did for a living, and he collected these things, and he was making big bucks. Let's put it that way. All right. God bless. Take care. Ciao. Bye.